new, and it's always nice to be in community to talk about these things. So we decided to just organize an online conversation so we can share some thoughts and just be in conversation about winter biking. So yeah, I think to start off with, I'll have everyone introduce themselves, and I can go first since I'm already talking. I'm Lynda Lopez. I'm an avid bike rider. I've been riding for, I guess, on the street and like, I guess more less than recreationally, I think for about a decade. I live in Pilsen, and I've been riding in the winter probably for, I think maybe since college. So it's been a while too. But I guess hardcore, quote unquote, for maybe 3 or 4 years when I started commuting to work. So yeah, and I also work at the Active Transportation Alliance. I do some bike advocacy, transit advocacy. That's a little bit about me. I'll turn it over to Ruth.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ruth. I live in Little Village. My pronouns are she, her, they, them. And I've been biking for about a decade as well. And then I started biking the same year that in the winter. I started biking in the winter the same year that I started biking in Chicago. So 10 years. And I'll pass it over to DeFrance.
Peace, everyone. I'm glad everyone enjoyed the music. Zoom life has consumed all our lives. So at any moment, I add some like joy and entertainment to the Zoom space. But yeah, I'm DeFrance, her pronouns. And yeah, I'm just really excited to be in the space talking about cycling in the winter. I started cycling in the winter about 3 years ago when I moved back to Chicago from warmer climate of Louisville and Houston, Texas. So yeah, and I'm also a part of the Two Wheel Gods Collective and have been doing bike advocacy for the past 3 years. So I'm going to pass it to Xail.
I saw you making eye contact with me. I was like, oh no.
You.
I know, right? I know. Hola, everyone. My name is Xail Hernandez. I am from Arizona. Just moved to Chicago. This is gonna be my second winter. And I think because I'm from from Arizona, people were like, "Oh no, poor thing. Let me give you all the information you need for winter bike riding." I also work working bikes, which is awesome because I am surrounded by like people who bike ride year round. So, and also like resources, people donate a lot of stuff through our organization. So it was really cool to like be exposed to all that knowledge and information. I'm more than happy to share that with you. I'm gonna pass it on to Mayra Salgado.
Yes, hi. Yes, Mayra Salgado. My pronouns are her, she and her. So I love bike riding. I feel like I use almost of transportation. I think I became more of a bike rider probably 5 to 6 years ago. I live in Logan Square, and I work in Pilsen, so I've even taken my bike to work to Pilsen. I'm just getting started doing bike riding during the winter. I'm definitely not a big fan of like the wind and trying to learn different, different pointers with biking in the winter. So that's why I'm here. But I did try this weekend, and it wasn't bad. But yeah, so that's why I'm here. I don't really bike in the winter. I'm more of like I like to walk in the winter, so I'll take long walks. But I'm just here to learn more tips. And I'll pass it over to.
Can we have Caronina introduce herself too?
Sure.
So she's one of the panelists. Sorry for cutting you off.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Caronina. She, hers, her, and I live in Lawndale, and I have been biking. I've been biking for a long time. I've been commuting for less time than I've been recreational biking. I've probably been commuting for, I don't know, 15 years. And then winter biking for maybe 4 years, I think. I'm pretty sure that a lot of you know a lot about winter biking as well, but I'm going to be happy to share with you what my experience has been like. And I should pass it to someone else, right?
I don't know if we have enough. Do we have enough time to like introduce everyone? Just
Let's see. 2, 3.
Maybe like a quick 10, 15-second, intro.
yeah.
Okay.
Say your name. Yeah.
All right. Say your
Jenny
name.
Fox.
So maybe you can just like pick people, Lynda.
How about the person talking? Just pick the next person.
Okay, so how about Danny Fox?
Hey, I'm muted. I've been biking for a long time, probably about 15 years or so, but commuting pretty regularly for the last maybe 4, and winter biking for 2.
Can I just pick someone? Cool, Courtney.
Hi, my name is Courtney, pronoun she, her, hers. I have lived on the far north side for about 6 years. I live in Rogers Park. I've been in Rogers Park for 3 years. Winter biking, this will be my first winter, like fully committing to it. I did it a little bit last winter. I would like do, half a mile trip to the train, or like just 1.5 miles to get from the train to wherever I was going. And this will be the first year of like using the train and buses less and like relying on my bike. Valentina.
Hi, everybody. My name is Valentina. I use she, her pronouns. I'm calling in from Portland, Oregon. Our winters are very mild here. I've never biked in the winter before, so I'm really excited to hear about this conversation and to learn from you all in what I'm sure is a much colder and snowier place. I'll pass it on to Scott.
Hi, everyone. I'm Scott, he, him, calling in from Northwest Side, Logan Square, and this will be my 3rd winter on the bike. I'm looking forward to this discussion. Passing it to Kate.
Hi, sorry, I'm also like cooking, so I'm trying not to have my madness in the background. But I'm Kate. I actually work with Lynda as well at Active Transportation Alliance. But I've been biking for a while. Started biking in the winter in like 2017 and was wholly unprepared for it. But I've learned a lot since then. But yeah, I'm very excited to get more tips to bike safely. I'm going to pass it off to Alex.
Hi, this is Katy, actually, on Alex's account. She, her, hers. I have been biking for 3 or 4 years, but I just moved actually to Syracuse, New York, and I am really looking forward to hearing about those snow tips for bike life. So nice to meet you. Next up, Kim.
Hey, hi. Can everybody hear me okay? Hey, hey, everybody. Super excited to be here and continue learning. I started like in my childhood and took like a very, very long break and then recently picked up that sport, which I was, what I consider it, like maybe like 5 years ago or so. And I started doing it during the winter, maybe like 3 years ago. So I have a little bit of experience, but like I'm excited to learn more. I don't know who has not gone yet. So maybe you just want to unmute yourself if you haven't gone.
I can go. I'm Clara. I'm visiting from New York City, and last winter was my first winter biking, and this one I'm not biking, so I'm just here to get all the tips. And then Audrey, I guess.
Yeah, hi. I'm Audrey she, her pronouns. I live in Lakeview. I work for the Metropolitan Planning Council on transportation issues, and I've been a bike commuter for about 13 years from Lakeview to the Loop. Not this year, working from home. I've usually biked around 8 months of the year, and not in the deep winter. So wanting to hear more about what I need to do to round out the full year.
Thank you, Audrey. I'm gonna go ahead and pick the next person. Let me see if we can just make it quick, short, and sweet. Let me see. Katy? Katy? I don't know if okay, no, Kazaz. I saw that you turned on your go. Or Valentina Chau, would you mind sharing something?
I already went, thanks.
Yeah, I think we just have Mark left and Kesla. I think.
Nice. Okay.
Right. So this is Mark, he, him, calling in from Bridgeport. Been enjoying biking so much during the pandemic. Pretty much biked every single day this month already, and want to just continue through the winter.
Anyone else that hasn't gone and wants to say a few words? All right. I think we can go ahead and start then. As I mentioned earlier, as the panelists introduce themselves, a few of us are going to be talking about biking in the winter. It will be a pretty informal panel discussion, conversational. I'll be moderating the panel, meaning I'll be asking the questions, but we're going to try to keep it organic. So I think to start off with, wanted to start off with a really broad question of asking the panelists, why do you bike in the winter? And anyone could start.
Oh, Caronina, you go. And then
Well, I mostly bike in the winter for the same reasons I bike other times of the year. It's more convenient than public transportation. It's faster than public transportation. I can get out and get fresh air. I really do think you see the city in a different way on a bike than you do any other mode of transportation. And so those are mostly the reasons why. When I wasn't biking in the winter, it was just a frustrating time. I mean, you're on these crowded platforms and the trains don't stop, or they're super full, or they smell, or they're slow. And I don't know, one day I thought, why am I doing this? And it was a fairly mild winter, I think, at that point. But it was time to stop. And so I stopped, but there was really no reason to. And so I continued to ride through the winter and found that it was fantastic.
Thank you, Caronina. I started bike riding because buses, public transportation in Tucson is not that great, not like here in Chicago. So waiting in 100-degree weather with no shade, yeah, it was very painful. So I think at one point it was just like, well, I have this bike, I used it, and from then on I have not stopped, and it's been over 4 years. And if I want to ride in the winter, honestly, I did it because I like the challenge. I was just like, it's only gonna make me a better bike rider. And once you fall, it doesn't hurt because you have all these layers. And I was like, great, you keep riding. So that's why I ride. I just love bike riding.
Yeah, I started biking out of necessity. My first job out of college was I made like 20K a year, and that was not enough to survive. And that was it was just really rough. And so I just ended up biking throughout the winter. And so it was a huge learning process for me. And I learned you can you don't need like all that fancy gear and stuff like that to ride through the winter, because I didn't have money to buy it. So I just went to Salvation Army and bought a bunch of layers. And that's kind of how I learned. I just like tested a bunch of like different things. And I just, the same year that I really started riding, I started biking in the winter. So, and I saved a bunch of money. I think I only spent like $190 for transportation in 1 year. And I remember I would like brag about it.
You should.
Yeah, I think when I first started riding in the winter was, I think it must have been college. Like I lived on campus and it was a really big campus, and I remember it was just like the easiest way to get from one side to the other. And I remember I was always running late for my morning classes, like every time. Like it was really hard to get to those 8:30 classes. So biking was like an easy way for me to like get to class in 5 minutes from the other side of campus. And so yes, I had already been writing, but I think it just became like a lot more useful at that time, even in the winter and in the snow. And it was also not long distances, so I think that also eased the transition into winter biking. You know, maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes, you don't feel as much of the, I would say, the pain than maybe riding for longer distances. So that was definitely my first introduction, and I kept riding out of I think it's a combination of, I guess, necessity, and like the sense that like I don't have a car, so like the bike is there to provide me with other forms of transportation aside from like public transit. It's also like a desire. I think like it's fun. It can be fun if you're able to like layer in the right ways. And I remember like when I first like legit started biking to work, to one of my jobs on the Southwest side, and I remember just having like a high getting to work after biking, even if it was like only 15 minutes. It was like it gave me like a nice boost in the morning. So it definitely wasn't the easiest way to get to work, but it was like the way I chose, and rather than taking the bus. And I just felt like it was a good way to start my morning. Even though like I think the issue of like sweating has been brought up, you know, how do you keep yourself from like being super sweaty, which is a thing to talk about. But I think in general, I've just been trying to keep up the habit, because I think it provides enough for me where I'm willing to keep figuring out how to like make this a habit for myself, and not drop off because other options might be quote unquote easier. So that's kind of how I started winter biking. Even though instinctively I don't think I processed it as winter biking. You know, it was just I just kept doing it even in the cold. So I think I'll transition into the next question. So what is your process of getting ready for biking in the winter? So in terms of like what do you need to prepare for? Like, is it like mentally, like, are there physical things you need to think about, like layering? So those kind of things.
I can go first. I definitely start like physically moving some of my stuff from my closet, from like the winter stuff to like a more visible, more accessible, because I have like an upper shelf. So I just like move that, which is like my winter gear, winter clothes, sweaters. Because you start feeling it, I'm just gonna put it right here. So that's like a physical, just like having it like, oh, it'll be, you know, it's coming, and that's okay. I'm ready, you know, I'm prepared. But that's how I start getting ready. And as far as like my bicycle, like that's physically, but like my bicycle, I add fenders to it. That's like, especially when it starts raining and all of that, I start adding like fenders, or I just like leave them the whole year. But that's one way to like physically do it. And then mentally, I'm like, I got this. Bring it, winter, you know, just bring it. I'm kidding. I respect it.
I am not as methodical. I pull out my things as I find them and just put them in a pile. And so as it becomes cold enough to use things, I find what I need in the pile. I find that I usually start with gloves, and I can't stress enough getting a good pair of gloves. I used to have a pair of Navarros that I wore like out. They got holes in them. I wore them until like it wouldn't fit around my fingers anymore because they were so holy, but they were really, when they worked well, they were warm and they had grip. And I got some of those claw ones that don't work as well. So I tried to find another pair of Morales, but all this to say, a really good pair of gloves goes a long way. And I think you can find them. I found my first pair used at like the REI garage sale. And I think my second pair were a gift, but I pile everything up. And as the weather gets colder and colder, I kind of unpack what it is that I want or what I think I'm going to need to bike. And as far as the weather, I don't know that I really think about the temperature. Once I get on the bike, I warm up pretty quickly. And so I know that that's going to happen. And so it's just a matter of getting out the door and in the saddle and on my way. And I have bike lanes for the most part, most of my commute, except this long stretch. That's not about half of my commute, because there's this long stretch on Ogden where there are no lanes. But I have a Shero that protects me from the rest of the traffic. But yeah, and layers.
Yeah, I'm not really methodical either. I actually usually like fight it for a long time, and I don't, I like don't even pull out my jacket till like I get on my bike and I'm like, oh, I think it's too cold to not bike without a jacket, and so that's usually how it goes for me. I think one of the biggest things that I've realized is like I've like bike, like Lynda said, you learn things every year. It has been like you learn like what parts of your body get colder faster. So like Caronina said that like your hands, like, or like her hands. For me, that's like one of the last things that I actually gets cold. So for me, I tend to like, it's like my face. So the first thing that I usually end up like doing is pulling my jacket or like a hoodie or whatever, like pulling it up because I feel like this part gets really cold. So this year the mask actually really helped because I was always wearing the mask. So I didn't really realize how cold I was getting, but like my neck, usually like that's the first thing. So as you're like learning how to bike, I think one of the biggest things is like learning what gets cold. So if it's like your feet or like getting wool socks, anything like that. So that's usually like the ways that I've realized now, like, so I usually start with like, something around my neck. And then as it gets colder, I start adding layers. And so at a certain point, I add like a base layer. And so we've talked about how like you don't want to use something that's like cotton because I'm actually really sweaty right now, and I just got done on my bike, and so it's kind of cold and it's windy, but you'll still sweat. So you want to definitely make sure you're wearing something that you like. I've noticed that even like when I was riding today, I work at Lurie and I live in Little Village, so I like, it's like 7 miles, and so you get pretty sweaty. So I start to like undress as I'm like riding, and so like the first thing I'll pull off are like my gloves, and that's how I know I'm warmed up, and then I take off like my first layer around my neck, and then if it gets really hot, then I take off, like I usually wear something around my ears because my ears are like the second thing that gets really cold. And so when I wear like a helmet, it like helps keep my head cold, like warm, but then gets really hot and then you start sweating. So then usually along my ride, I'll take off like something around my ears. And so that's kind of like the ways you start to learn like what parts of your body get like cold or warm faster. And so I would suggest, one of my biggest tips is like to get layers around those things that you can easily like pull off and stuff like that. And then I would also like make sure you have pockets, because then as you're taking stuff off, you can like stuff it in your pockets. So that's kind of like the progression that I bike, or I figure out like the like coldness and things like that.
I was just quickly gonna add to like one of the things that I started learning biking throughout the years, getting to know my body and the different weather changes and all of that. So it just starting to be mindful and aware, and it sort of like extends to that. But yeah, no, and then you just make a mental note, and then it's like, okay, how can I make it better? It's like, oh, gloves, and stuff like that. Lynda, go.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna echo what Ruth was saying around like learning the temperature of your body and what gets cold and what doesn't. I feel like that's one of the more important things that as part of like winter biking, like what gets cold. Like for myself, I think I have a lot more tolerance like in my lower body, like my feet. I do not like layering socks. I feel like it makes like the shoe feel very like tight, and I don't like that. So I can be a little colder on my feet. And my pants, I think I can also tolerate more because I prefer less layers in my lower half because I think then I think interferes with my pedaling. It just feels like bulkier, so I don't enjoy that. But I think my upper body, I have a lot less tolerance. Like my face, like it can be really painful with the wind. So I think definitely like a few years ago learning like about like balaclavas and getting like a few of those. So those are basically face masks for the winter. A lot of people use them for winter biking. So I got a few of those probably like 3 years ago. And this year I also like probably about a month or two ago, I bought a few other ones just to like I think as part of like thinking about what kind of like I guess how many more like layers do I need as part of my mask. Like on colder days I use one of the thicker ones I have, and on slightly warmer days but still kind of cold, I might use a little bit of thinner one for my face. So I pay attention to which one my face might need. I think when it's past I think like when it's below like 40 degrees, I might use my thicker one, and when it's a little higher, I might use my thinner one. So I think the face for me is very important, and also gloves. I think I definitely have a little less tolerance with my like hands, so I also got some better gloves recently. So I think that's a really important part. Just thinking about what parts of your body are like I think you have less tolerance for, and that you get colder for, and also learning like what gets warmer as you start pedaling. I think I think even with the layers, like today I was riding and I was glad I had layers on, but then I started sweating, and I think for me, I'm okay with the sweat. Like I think I'd rather have that than like under layering, being cold. So I'm like good with like being a little sweaty by the end of my ride. So I think it's kind of like realizing what kind of parts of that biking life you're okay with, and what kind of things like clothes and additional layers can make up for some of those like nuances of winter biking. So I think that's definitely something I think about as I prepare for like colder weather. And I think it's also a little bit mental for me as well. I start thinking about, well, I might not be able to do as many recreational rides, like it's getting colder. So I feel like I have to transition myself into like another mindset. Like, okay, if I want to keep riding, like it might have to be shorter rides, or like what kind of riding do I want to do? Am I gonna ride to work? So I do have those like considerations, like because it's not as casual as in like the summer. Like it's easier to like leave your house in the summer, I think, with your bike because you don't have to layer. There's like more of a mental process involved with all the layering. It's like it's like a super prepping period, for me at least, before I get on my bike and leave the house. And then I live on the second floor, so I have to think about carrying it and I don't know, there's like different like things that I think about when I leave my house and to get on a bike. So those are some of the things that I would say. And I think just to
I would also
go ahead.
I'm sorry, I was gonna interrupt. Well, I would just say invest in a good moisturizer. I actually don't use a face cover. I don't know why my face doesn't bother me in the cold. I have used it like when it got low, like really low temperatures, like that winter when it was like 7 degrees, like I would use it then because that was dangerous. It would be dangerous to not. But other than that, I don't know. That's not been like one of my cold spots. So I think whoever said it, I don't remember. is like get to know your body and which extremities or parts of your body you are going to need to keep warmer than others. I don't wear scarves either because I get really hot and I end up unzipping at some point in the ride because I get so hot. And so that's something that I had to learn as well. So for a few weeks when I first started, I would show up to work like really sweaty because I had too many clothes on. But once I kind of figured out what kind of my sweet spot was, it worked out better. But yeah, a good moisturizer for your skin.
That's lucky with your, I feel like my face, like I think that's like the first thing I feel when it starts getting colder.
Wow. That's so
Yeah,
interesting.
same here. And the other thing that you said, extremities, like so when it gets like so I know that like some people don't want to bike when it's like really, really cold. I think I've biked through a couple blizzards now. And when it got like, when it dropped, I remember in 2014 or 2013, it dropped to like -42 with the wind chill. And I biked through it because I'm stupid and I don't recommend it. So what you want to do if you do want to bike through something like that is that you want to get the hand warmers and you want to put them in your gloves. And so usually when it's that cold, I also don't recommend actually gloves. I recommend mittens so that all your fingers can stay together. And you put the hand warmer in like the end of your glove of your mitten, and then that kind of radiates heat. It might burn though, so sometimes you want to take it out too. So and then I also usually put it in my boots, and my boots have a little bit of space. A lot of my clothes are like made so that anyway, so like there's a little bit of space in my boots, so I stuffed the warmers in there. I actually don't know if it'll ever get that cold again because of climate change. I mean, that's what I'm thinking, right? But like I think that the winters have been so mild. Like I know that last year we had a really, really cold winter, or like a week where it was really, really cold. But I remember like back in 2012, 2013, like would get so incredibly cold and it was just really snowy. So that was like one thing that I remember learning, or somebody told me to stuff the hand warmers in for your extremities, because when that starts to get cold, like that's like pretty much across the board. When you don't get any more heat, it's really hard to warm it up on your ride. Like it's real because you're not moving your hands or your toes. It's really hard to get that warm compared to the other parts of your body. So definitely, and that's when like you can get frostbite. So please be careful. That's just one thing that I wanted to mention.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think, yeah, like I think the snow hasn't been as prevalent in Chicago anymore. I think I think I could still rely on the cold coming. I feel like snow is definitely not as much of an issue, at least in the last few years, which is alarming. But I think that also changes like how you're interacting outside on a bike. I think I don't particularly like biking in the snow, but I can handle the cold a lot more than like I enjoy just like all the slush on the bike. And I would also echo Caronina's comment around like the scarf. I don't really like wearing scarves either when I'm biking. I used to, and then I feel like it gets also bulky and I don't enjoy that. But I think the face mask for me kind of serves that purpose, the one that kind of encompasses your face because it's going around your neck too. So at least I don't have the necessity of putting that additional like cloth. It's kind of all also just about like making sure you're comfortable. I think when you have like layers that are like, flapping or like making it like more of a distracted ride. I don't like rides where I'm like conscious of what I'm wearing because I have to like move it aside or like it's interfering with my ride. I think that's when I get distracted, and I also don't like being distracted when I'm riding because I feel like I have to be hyper focused in just the biking world in general, the biking life. So I think I'll go on to the next question, which I think we started to address with this question. What are some elements, and this can kind of go beyond like clothes, you can kind of continue talking about clothes, but what are elements about biking in the winter people should consider?
I was gonna say the route, Right now, you guys mentioned the snow. I always like to, so when you're talking about being super mindful and aware of your body and how it starts changing with the bicycle, it's also like the route that you're taking. I noticed there's like these metal plates on the ground. Those get icy pretty quickly. I didn't know. I found out the right way, so it was pretty fun. Just and then potholes. Like I remember like memorizing potholes on my route and just being like, oh, I'm gonna go on this street, but maybe not because there's like this metal plate or there's this pothole that's been there for the whole year, and especially when it gets really really snowy and slushy, I just take the main roads because you have bus stops, you have the buses passing through, and because you get a flat, it's just like more trafficked by cars, so they'll clear out the snow, and I just take the lane. They'll honk at me, but that's and then also I know, but there's salt. I know that you guys put salt on the street, so watch out with that, because that also makes your entire bicycle, your like car suit, just like really rusty. So just keeping like that will save you money to just like clean it, and then like put a little bit of oil. Otherwise, I'm just gonna charge you a lot. I'm kidding. I won't charge you to fix it, but that's just like keeping an eye on the road, just like really mentally, and then also listen to my body. And if at any time you start getting really thirsty, but you don't notice it, which is weird. In the desert, it's just like you're thirsty, you're drinking water constantly. Here, I had to remind myself to be like, I just rode for like 7 miles. I should stop and drink some water, because then it just like hits you in the face. So keep yourself hydrated. Keep yourself, constantly reminding yourself, like, is my body okay? Am I feeling okay? Like in my extremities, am I feeling safe? If you're way too stressed out, just like jump in the bus, right? And then just like try to do that, or call your friend or something, because that definitely, if bike riding during like the summer, if your commute's already a little bit tricky and hard and stressful, winter definitely adds like a thick layer of stress and anxiety. So depending on you, just like listen to it.
I see a question. I'll just ditto what Xail said, and I saw a question pop up. I rinse my bike off probably once or twice a week, and I just throw it in the shower. I do. It's probably not the best, but it gets all the grime off, and I just walk away. I leave it in for a few minutes, and then I come back. And if there's stuff that's still like caked on or whatever, I'll rinse it off. And then I do try to dry it as best I can, and then I oil the chain, but I just stick it in the shower for a few minutes. I forgot the question though, Lynda.
Oh yeah, if you had anything to add around, like what are some elements about biking or factors that people should consider about biking in the winter besides like layering, or you can kind of elaborate on that as well. Kind of like Xail was talking about how like being more mindful of your body, and there's like some more stress involved with biking in the winter.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you had anything to add around that.
I definitely pay a lot more attention to the drivers. It seems like drivers are more distracted in the winter than they are when it's not winter. And so I find myself being a bit more wary about the drivers. I'm a bit more cautious when I come up to intersections. And yeah, in addition, I agree with all the things that Xail's already shared, but that would be one more thing I would add.
Yeah, I would really agree with that. I think that I don't know if it's like distraction or maybe just like they're like I'm not sure what it is, but there was definitely a difference in driving in the winter and in the summer. I've noticed that sometimes I think it's because the roads there's less traffic on certain roads at certain times in the winter, that cars go faster normally than in the summer when people are out and about. Maybe because it feels like desolate because people aren't walking. I'm not exactly sure, but I've noticed that like speeding on certain streets is a lot higher during the winter. And I think that people, when it's snowing, drivers are super confusing to me during the winter, because it feels like they're also hesitant because it's snowing. So then they start to maneuver in ways around the street that is like, I don't think it's like very intuitive. And so I tend to go a lot slower in the winter. The other thing that I tend to do consideration is that I actually end up taking the lane a lot more in the winter. And by a lot, I mean, like, I pretty much ride in the car lane during the winter, and I'm like, screw everyone else. And the reason why is because I think that, like, maybe also because it's cold, people don't pay attention. And so and it gets darker easier or earlier. So I think that putting myself in a place where people can see me is like one of the biggest things, like, so lights, being seen, that's like a big thing for me in the winter. So I tend to ride in the lane and just kind of, and the way that I try to be like nice to people, I'm usually like bundled up, but I'll try to like wave at them and be like, hi, don't hit me, please. And people don't have their windows rolled down either. So I try to make a lot more eye contact or for them to see me somehow. So that's like a big thing for me in the winter.
I was also going to talk about the bicycle. Feel free to always add a mirror, since you're like bundled up. Sometimes you have the goggles. Your side vision is not like super accessible. So, and then also just practicing of like, if you have all of that, just riding on a really low, like even just right now when it's not like really cold or snowy, just practicing with all the gear, just like turning, right? Because then I've gotten really scared, like not knowing whether there's a car behind me or not. So people add on their helmet a little mirror or on the handlebar. But then you have like all this gear too, right? It can be confusing. And Ruth, I appreciate that, like becoming really visible. Like that's when I notice more bicyclists who have been biking a lot have like either one or two lights that have like this like different patterns of blinking. Because if your car drivers already are used to their lights, so creating like different pattern they have reflective vests, like really good ones. Squeaky brakes, those are awesome. I get squeaky brakes on my bike because it's slushy and wet. I use them to like be really loud, or sometimes I'll yell loud. I use, like if I have my hands accessible, I'll whistle really loud, but they know that I'm there. And then also making eye contact, that's such a huge important factor, because then drivers are like, oh, another human being, it's not a thing on a bicycle, it's another human being, right? And then they're waving or just going like that. I don't know, something that it humanizes you, right? So people can be like, oh yeah, I gotta like watch out. But yeah, use everything to make yourself very predictable and very visible, whether it's by sight or by ear. I have a friend, actually one of my coworkers, Travis, he has a horn that he'll like press, and it's like really loud. That was genius. I'm gonna do that for next year for sure.
Yeah, I just wanted to also like add on to some of those comments. I think what everyone said around like drivers being, I think just the dynamic of how drivers are on the road changes. And I was thinking about this today actually. Like I'm not a really reckless driver. I mean, biker, and I'm also kind of generally very cautious even in the summer. I think I never give drivers the benefit of the doubt. So, and I think it always serves me. Like yesterday, I was like crossing like Western Avenue, and I always wait like 1 or 2 seconds because I'm like, there's probably gonna be someone running the red light, and yeah, there's people riding the red light. So I think that's how I operate in general, even outside of the winter, because I don't really trust drivers. I mean, no offense to drivers, but I think a lot of them aren't conditioned to pay attention to people on bikes. But I think in the winter especially, it definitely gets worse. I think I don't know maybe it's just that there's a lot less people on bikes, which is true. There's a lot less people on bikes. So I think a lot of people aren't watching out for people on bikes because there are just a lot less people. So I definitely try to go slower. And I think Ruth's point about taking the lane, I think is important, thinking about like what makes you feel safe. Like I don't take the lane because I don't want cars behind me. I don't feel very safe. But it's about figuring out like what makes you feel safe. And I think that's a big part of like biking in general, like what makes you feel empowered, like what doesn't. And sometimes, you know, I might just like get on the sidewalk for a second if I don't really like how many cars are in one intersection. And so I make decisions like that just to facilitate continuing to bike. Because I think if you're biking all the time with like fear, then, you know, it might deter you from continuing. So I try to just like keep that in mind. Like, how do I feel? Do I feel safe? Is there a way for me to like lessen the amount of cars around me? Can I just take another route? So I definitely am always negotiating that in my mind. I think the less cars around me, the better. That's just how I like to bike. But I know that's not the reality of biking in Chicago. So I think those are things I think about a lot more in the winter. And I think the visibility piece is very important too. So I bike with like a little speaker. So I'm always blasting music. So I'm like, okay, they'll probably hear me maybe. and lights too. I got some new lights too a couple months ago, because I think my other ones are like getting dimmer, and the ones I have now are pretty like high visibility. So I'm like, okay, like you definitely can see me because these lights are very bright. You definitely can't ignore me. So I think those are definitely some things to think about, like what makes you feel like visible, and also what makes you feel safe. I think that's always really key. Like what makes you feel safe on a bike, because there's a lot of things out there making you feel unsafe, and the roads just aren't created for people on bikes. Like, I mean, you could put a bike lane here and there, but that, you know, that's not like, I don't know, that's not all encompassing infrastructure. So you kind of have to create your own rules for yourself and what's going to work for you, you know. Like I think that's kind of how I approach biking. Like I'm not the same as a driver on the road, so I might do something like a little differently to make sure I feel safe. So those are definitely some things I think about. So I think just to transition into the last question, and we had allotted about 15 minutes for Q&A, so we might go a little over 7 o'clock, but we want to get to a Q&A, but I also want to get to this last question, which I think is really important. So what are issues of equity around biking in the winter? And I think just biking in general, but specifically biking in the winter, like what are some issues around equity that you need to think about, or we should think about?
Well, I think generally biking while Black is, at least in Chicago, is dangerous and expensive. People in communities that are predominantly Black are ticketed disproportionately higher than people everywhere else. Both people who ride bikes, people who park in the bike lanes. I don't advocate for parking in the bike lanes, just so we're clear, but people who park in bike lanes in Lawndale are more likely to get tickets than people who park in bike lanes in Lincoln Park. And more people park in bike lanes in Lincoln Park than park in the bike lanes in North Lawndale. But they're still ticketed at a ridiculously higher rate. So that's one thing. I also think biking on the sidewalk in the winter is often safer than biking in the street. And I know folks who have been ticketed because they are trying to stay safe and riding their bikes on the sidewalk, and they get pulled over by a police officer and they're ticketed. I think in some cases, it's worse than other cases because sometimes maybe that person, like that's not the first time they've been pulled over, or that's not the first ticket they've had, or they're, you know, they have a warrant. And so it like the situation just becomes exacerbated, or because they haven't paid the tickets that they've already gotten. And so the situation becomes exacerbated, right? And so when you talk about issues of equity on bikes, we have a long way to go.
I wanted to kind of mention that as well. So I know this might be like kind of a weird thing, but so I asked my friend the other day, and I was just like, at what age do you think that that like me biking all the time won't be just like, oh, like that person just likes to bike, and not like that person has a DUI and they just can't drive? Because that is like a real, like I actually very much think that people don't see cyclists in certain areas like Black and brown areas because they tend to be older, I've noticed. They tend to not have really great, beautiful Trek, specialized, whatever bikes. And they tend to bike like for commuting instead of like for fun or, you know, like whatever, the ways that sometimes people do, you know, in other areas. And so I think that, and so what I hear sometimes is like, especially when I moved to Little Village, I often heard like, oh, people don't bike there. And I actually, when I biked here, I started seeing way more people on bikes. Like when I was biking, I would run into more people biking in my area than I did in other parts of like my commute. You know, whether it be like West Loop or whatever. And so I just thought it was so odd that we don't see people. We don't see Black and brown cyclists. And then, you know, because of that invisibility of them, we also don't see like their need to have like bike infrastructure. And so I think that's like a really big thing, you know, that is, it's obviously really obvious when you bike from north to like the south, or, you know, if you're going, you know, to Belmont Cragen, there's nothing there, there's nothing. And so I just like think about the fact that like a lot of cyclists are invisible to these like power structures. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that like we don't see them as like conventional cyclists, and that like visibility again is really detrimental. And so I think these considerations of equity also play into like the way our streets are designed and just like what we have access to. And so I think one of my biggest things learning about biking is like sometimes I'm really scared of biking in certain parts of like my neighborhood at night because I hear gunshots. And so it really like actually scares me. So I think that a big part is advocacy. So like, yeah, you tend to become like kind of an advocate when you start biking somehow, but yeah.
I definitely got really good exposure to different, like I've written to like past Lincoln Park. I went all the way to Evanston. Of course, I have a trail over there, and it's like protected and covered and beautiful and green. You know, like we don't have green in Arizona. And then you come to like I've been to Garfield Park. I've been to Lawndale. I've been to Brownsville. It was actually pretty pretty awesome. But it, you know, like it just like yeah, you notice like the huge difference, and also the maintenance where the money goes into maintaining these trails and these bike lanes that you don't see. You just see the traces of like, you know, oh, there used to be a bike lane. Well, that's great. You know, I see like the bicycle on the street that's faded away. I have, which is the same, unfortunately, like the same in Tucson, Arizona. Like you in the north side, you see like really nice, beautiful lanes. The west side, because it's a big cyclist community, but not so much for like commuters. It's more for like people who are training and doing, because we have really long lanes on the west side. So it's they're beautiful, they're spacious, they're maintained, they're lit, right? And then that's something that you don't see here. And I think for that too, when you start becoming super mindful of your body, right? And then what you wear, what you feel, and also the street, you start like it starts expanding, right, to different parts of that. It's like, wait a minute, like it's so different from this place to the other. But then later on, it's sort of like having this conversation. It's like, well, what next? You know, like, you know, now that I'm here, it's like, how can I help? How can I advocate? How can I like point it out and be like, I don't want to be scared of red lights because it's really dark at night and people are staring and they know I'm a girl because I'm wearing shorts. Like, I want to be able to keep biking, you know, safely and confidently. So, yeah, definitely keep having conversations like these.
Mm-hmm. And I think when you talk about lanes and infrastructure, like I live in Lawndale, and I can't remember when we got bike lanes in Lawndale, but I was sure that the white people were coming because that's why we were getting the bike lanes. It just turned out that they were putting the lanes in for the people who bike the boulevards. And so they're really nice lanes on the boulevard, but that's it. There's lanes on the boulevard. Roosevelt Road is a pretty highly traveled route, and the bike lane stops at California, and doesn't pick up for, I don't think it picks up again in the city. I don't know. And so it's stuff like that, the more I ride around the city, the more I just see how much and where the infrastructure for bicycles, where those investments are. And they're not here.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I would echo everyone's comments. I think some issues of like equity that I think about are like safety is a big point of conversation, and safety like in a lot of different ways. Like I think safety for me and thinking about biking in the winter meant like I guess like knowing that when I would come home at night, and this is my last apartment in Little Village, knowing that there would probably be like a few drunk men near my door, and that was kind of just like the reality of where I was living. I really enjoyed where I live, but I think that was just part of like the nighttime of my building. So that was definitely something I had to think about. Like I'm gonna be coming home at night. Going through viaducts where there's like encampments, and that's like a very common feature of like Pilsen, Little Village, where I like frequently bike. So that was also something that not that I felt unsafe by them, but it was more of like just almost like a feeling of like visceral discomfort seeing like people like on the street, like living like with couches. They're like kind of, you're like seeing their home like on a bike, and I don't know, that I think that's for me layered in like this feeling of safety when I'm biking at night, and which I think becomes amplified in the winter because there's just a lot less people out, and just the lack of lighting. I feel like lighting is just such a big issue, like and that's why it's so important, like for me at least, to have really bright lights. When I was looking for them, I was thinking like, well, I know some of these street lights near my house don't have great lights. They're not, some of them go out, and I'm like, I need to compensate. And but that costs money, you know. Like I know some of the lights that I bought were like not super cheap. Like the ones I wanted were like $30-$40, maybe more. I can't think of the exact number, but you know, they're like, they cost money to buy like some high quality lights. And I think that's why, kind of like what Ruth was saying, this turns you into an advocate. Like I remember reading about a really great effort. I don't think it was in Chicago, but of just like giving out lights to like working class cyclists in Black and brown communities, which I think is a great effort. I've never heard of that being done here, but I think light is such a big part of just biking in the winter, particularly when there's just a lot less sunlight during the day. So I think those are just like some key things that I think about, like who is living in communities where like just a lot of the infrastructure just doesn't serve you safely riding on the street. And that's often our like Black and brown communities on the south and west sides and northwest side of our city. So I think there's a lot of things to think about in terms of how we can equitably think about getting more people to ride safely. So it's a little past 7. We wanted to also leave time for Q&A, but we hadn't allotted a lot of time past 7. But I think we want to take some questions. So whoever wants to stay on and kind of bring up a question. There was a lot of questions in the chat box. I might not have caught all of them, but you can drop them again or just unmute yourself and ask a question.
Lynda, is it cool to show my slides real quick? Just like
yeah, go ahead.
1.5 minutes, just to like sort of like review real quick of what we talked about. Difference, do you have
you can share your screen, or do you want me to?
Oh, okay. No, I can do it. Let me go ahead and go to my computer real quick. Just to quickly show some of the stuff that we have talked about. So let me see. Here's can everybody see it? Cool. So just quickly, just to show, like this infographic was made by Lina and Sadi here at Working Bikes. She was one of our interns, really cool kid. I say kid, but she's 19. But this is like some of the layering for how to layer like during the winter. And then you have your base layer, chili layer, cold, slushy layer, freezing layer, and so on. And I'll be happy to share some of this information as well. But we have just like the basic, right? The foundation. It definitely varies on your type of commuting, right? Your distance, right? Your body, whether you need some of this stuff or not. But this is super helpful. Then we have also, you're not just talking about yourself, but also your bicycle. We definitely want to have lights and reflectors. We want to add fenders to it. Cold slushy on your back is not awesome. Tires are pretty awesome. You definitely need to maintain your tires, just keeping air in them, and also the thread and also the width of it. You want to make sure that they don't have a lot, like mountain bikes that have like a lot of knobs, and that's really good for grips, like if you're mountain biking. But you want something a little bit more slick, that way it can cut through the snow, right? And rust, you want to prevent the rust. You want to keep that chain loop. You want to just clean it, just put oil a little bit. Not just that, anything that's like metal to metal movement, right? All your pivot points that move together, like your derailleur, your both derailleurs, anything that has like, a bolt or something that's metal to metal touching, just throw a little bit of a drop of oil there. It goes a long way. I'm also gonna share real quick on the material. This blew my mind. I'm just sharing it because back in Tucson, I didn't have to worry about this. I didn't know what wool was. I didn't like, need to worry about it. But Gore-Tex is amazing. It comes in different ways. It's like it's big gloves, it's shoes, really thin gloves. Those are pretty awesome. Polyester. Polyester is a really good baseline that I try to wear a lot. Silk. I know this, but like I have one of my coworkers, Josh. He's wearing like silk shirt that he found thrifting. So there's silk and spandex and wool. Wool, that's really cool that you like sweat, and apparently the sweat goes on top of like the outer side of the material, which is really cool. Unlike cotton, I learned the hard way, you guys. Cotton, nobody told me. I learned the hard way when I'm bike riding. I could actually feel getting colder from inside out, which was super weird. And of course, in the desert, we use cotton. We love it. Bar mitts are really cool. They're pricey. It is a one-time expense, though. Just to have it as an option, especially if you're gonna be bike riding long distance, right? And there's for flat bar, road bar. Let me see. And one of the things that I like to like sort of inform myself, not to promote REI. I'm not like a PR or anything. I was just like really fascinated by like all the information that they were giving. So I went to REI, expert advice. They have like really good information on like bike maintenance. Let me see. Let me show you real quick. Expert advice on cycling. And then you can just go to like all cycling articles, care and repair. So we have all this information, short, quick videos that sometimes I have used in one of my bike series. Very, very helpful. Let me go to the second page. This is really cool. How to choose what to wear on a bike ride. That's where it gives you like all the gear. One of the things that I've learned, as we talked about the materials, polyester, Gore-Tex, all of that. I learned the word breathable. That's really cool. Your body generates a lot of heat. So breathable material, right? Of what you need depending on your commuting. Breathable material. That's something that you can go ahead and have and purchase. You don't have to necessarily purchase here. What I've done is really cool. It's just like remember like the brands and like the materials and all that stuff, and then I go thrifting, and hopefully I just find something really cool for like super cheap. But that's it. That's all I wanted to share. Thank you. All right.
I think we can take some questions. I know we hadn't allotted a lot of time past the hour, but I wanted to leave room for that if anyone wants to jump in. I haven't thoroughly gone through that, so you could just drop it again or unmute yourself.
I think Clara was going to ask a question.
All right.
So I was wondering about this is like a larger conversation, but about catcalls when you're on your bike. I noticed with my first bike, it was very upright and I was like sitting like this, and I was catcalled maybe like once a week, but then I got a bike where I was like leaning more forward, and it was like 2 times the ride every time, like people were yelling at me and I never know what to do. So I was just like wondering what people do, because in my head I'm like, I'm faster than them, I can say something, but it never feels safe. So I was like wondering what other people do with their experience.
I ignore it. I mean, I know that's not like super helpful, but I just don't respond or pay attention.
I know this isn't, I know that maybe like this is going to be like going against what some people think, but I also like Lynda said, have music in the summertime, and so a lot of times I can block that out. And then I also use headphones, and I know that sometimes people don't like that because they think that if you have headphones, you can't hear what's going around you, which is, in my opinion, good sometimes. But somebody told me like, well, deaf people also, or like, you know, people who are deaf also ride bikes. So that shouldn't be like an impediment. So what I tend to do is that I tend to keep it like somewhat at a level where I can still hear cars, but I'm focusing on the music or the podcast. And one time I had a guy who came up behind me and slapped my butt when I was at a stop sign, and or like a stoplight, and I was really pissed. And I remember feeling like unsafe and like wanting to like yell. But I do think that there is a power in trying to just like not even look at them. But it is like, to me, sometimes it does feel like unsafe. And I guess like a big thing that I do is just try to like tune it out. And I know this is like a big thing with cars as well. So I don't know. I don't know if that's really helpful though.
Repeat your question.
Oh yeah, just what are some people's experience with catcalling, responding, not responding, etc.
So I definitely can relate to that catcalling, especially in the summer. I've tried my best to ignore it, and sometimes I just get so pissed. If they're going, you know, if they catcall me and they come to a stoplight and I pull by them, I usually be like, flick them off, or I'll just, you know, it's just depending how safe you feel. Because sometimes, you know, I'll go the other way, and sometimes it just throws them off, like, whoa, like what's happening? But obviously, like, you have to feel safe about it, because you can only ignore it so much before it really starts to get to you. I mean, even walking, and honestly, even sometimes I'm driving and I get catcalled while I'm driving. So it's just, yeah, it doesn't even matter what you're doing pretty much, because you're gonna get catcalled.
Unfortunately.
There's a group of older men that are at the park every morning as I ride on my way to work, and I know someone's gonna say something, and they see me every day. And you know, while we're not friends, like I know that they're there, they know that I'm coming, and I know that I'm, you know, I know to expect something from somebody, and so not to normalize it in any way, but I also try to put it in context. I think a lot of these folks, they have challenges, and different kinds of challenges, and I have decided just to try to ignore it and to not let it bother me, but I also don't encourage it. And one of the things that I have taken, that I have started to notice in the last few years, is just the increase in the amount of like road rage that's happening around the city. And so it's another reason why I just ignore things, because you just don't know how people are going to respond. And it shouldn't be that way, but.
Yeah, I also definitely don't respond to it unless it's really like close and personal. Like I remember like this Mexican guy, I was just like, hey, más respeto, and like he was just like, oh, she talked back, you know. But granted, he like I wasn't afraid of him, right? But if he were to be, I don't know, a white man or a black guy, and then it wasn't like in the neighborhood that I'm like close to home, like I don't know how I would have responded, right? And I need to be mindful of that. I also try to keep writing. I'm getting pretty like sassy when it comes when I feel safe to run a red light and just be like, I don't want to deal with that, you know, and I just keep going. Of course, look both ways, make sure there's like 0 cars for like miles and miles and then you can just keep going. And then sometimes I just like if they're really close, I just tell them ill. I'm like ill. I'm like, cause you know, it's like ride a bike or something, but you know, and then there's just like, oh, the fact that sometimes we respond in a way that they don't expect. They're like, oh, you know, and then I just keep writing. I don't expect them to catch me because sometimes they're like, their belly's too big or they're just too old, which I admire the confidence, right? But then I'm just like, ew, I'm like, you wish or something. But, and then I just keep doing it. I definitely try to wear what I want to wear, what makes me safe, you know, what makes me feel me and comfortable, right? If short shorts make me feel safe, I'm gonna wear that, right? So it's tricky. It's really, really tricky. Good question.
Yeah, I feel like what Ruth was saying around music, I think that definitely helps me. Like I don't like blast it, but it's like loud enough for me to like hear. Like, and I think I still get the ambiance noise, but I think it's like it's something soothing for me to like pay attention to. So it kind of almost blocks out any like negative things I might hear. That's like it's like I think it's like an interesting thing, like what provides you peace while you're biking. So like music has definitely been a big part of that. With kind of I don't know, canceling out some of that like harassment. And also like maybe being just like quicker through certain intersections. So kind of like I feel like now I have like a mental picture of like especially where like men hang out, like and where they're drinking, like in my community. So I'm like, even when I'm walking, I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna go down. Like I had like a friend that lives like 2 blocks from me, and I'm like, I definitely have like figured out how to get to her house without like having to interact with a lot of guys, and it's like a really weird like little turnaround, but it just makes me feel safer. So that's something that I also know. I just like make mental maps about like where people are and where I'm more likely to experience harassment, and it's like those strategies that have like worked for me and made it a little easier. And I think part of it was also like moving. I think really helped too, because I think in my last apartment it was just a lot experiencing like interacting with a lot of like drunken men at night that wasn't like fun. And I don't think it's not about like demonizing them necessarily, saying like, oh, you need to leave the neighborhood. It was just that it didn't make me feel safe, you know. So yeah, there's like, and not to say people should have to move, and that wasn't like the deciding factor, but it's definitely like a benefit of not being at that apartment anymore. So yeah, I think those are a few things that I think about in terms of like trying to ignore the catcalling.
Thank you guys.
I really want to add to this question. I'm sorry, just like one last thing. I appreciate just this moment of like commiseration, because that's something that a lot of us have experienced. I did just want to mention that I'm a poet, so I just whatever that interaction was, I just hold on to it and just put it in a poem, or just make something like creative and transform that energy. That's like, you know, you're biking, you're like having a good day, like the music is blaring, like it's wonderful outside, and then suddenly that happens. It's like I try to not let it ruin my day, and I think that like having that outlet has definitely helped.
Yeah, that's awesome. I like that. I like the whole creativity, channeling into something creative. I know there was another question that I thought was really important that maybe we should get to, that Scott asked. And he asked, how do you reconcile improving bike infrastructure with gentrification? And I think that was something that Caronina brought up. And so I don't know who wants to kind of go with that.
I find that there's this whole narrative around who rides bikes that's just false. I think that there are folks who live in North Lawndale who have ridden bikes for 20 years. And these are old Black people, young Black people, men, women. They ride bikes. And when they put the bike lanes in, it took a bit of it took time for folks to actually start using the bike lanes, like folks from the neighborhood, because the bike lane wasn't where they usually rode their bikes. Because sometimes they rode the other way down the street. Like that's just where they did. And what is this here for? Like they, but more and more you see people who have, or just normally ride around the neighborhood, they're using the bike lanes. And so, well, I do think in a lot of times and in a lot of situations, it is a harbinger. I never know if it's a hard G or a soft G, but whatever. It's a sign of what's to come. But I think it's not always the case. And so as soon as I said that, I was like, I should have provided some context, but I didn't. But I really do think that there's a narrative that that we have broadly that just isn't accurate. And I think it's the same on the South Side as well. It's not just the West Side, but it's the same on the South Side.
And I say that all the time too, like that is like a thing where it's like, oh, the bike lanes are coming, so that means like gentrification is happening or white people are coming. And a big thing is like that is, you know, working with our communities, that's like something that has happened. But a big thing is like our communities also deserve infrastructure. We also deserve to have these things, these like nice things in our communities. And I think like sometimes when I see, you know, really great infrastructure being laid down in Lakeview or, you know, Wicker Park or whatever, I think about the investment that could be made in our communities. And we know that that drives up prices for homes. And so obviously this is where like that bike advocacy, or like that, you know, biking makes you into an advocate or makes you realize a lot of things, you know, like that's when we try to pay attention to what communities are saying, and so, and letting them lead around what they want to happen. And so I think that's a big thing, is like listening to communities, because I do think that, you know, I think about that all the time. I'm like, well, we also deserve all this great infrastructure, and why don't we get it?
Yeah, I think, I don't know, I feel like I've definitely developed a like nuanced thought, like understanding of like bike lanes and like gentrifying communities and what they represent. I think, like, I agree with Ruth that our communities deserve infrastructure, and at the same time that they're indicative of like priorities that oftentimes aren't brought up by the community at hand. So I think I'm not like necessarily against bike lanes. I guess I'm more interested in the process to developing them. And I think the Northwest Side is a really good example of Belmont Cregan. There's like the youth committee with the Northwest Side Housing Center has been really, they've been really involved to try to get bike lanes in their community. And it's like, well, Belmont Cregan, like you don't really think of them as like kind of being bougie or like being like gentrified or anything like that. But there's like people that want bike lanes and they're like helping to lead the effort. For me, that's kind of the way to counter this this idea of like bike lane meaning gentrification, because I think they can mean gentrification when the people in the community aren't at all involved. Like it's just like kind of like someone else decided that they needed bike lanes, and it's not like the bike lanes themselves are nefarious or evil things. It's more of it's the process that makes it so. Like the people there weren't involved, and I think that's kind of how you counter that. And the 606 is also an example of like, you know, the community wanted like, they wanted green space. They wanted more like walking and biking space. But it kind of also became this part of like Ron Emanuel's like building a new Chicago effort. So again, like how is the community involved throughout the process to make sure that it's not like just a tourist attraction, you know? So there's a lot of things to that question. I think it's not about being against bike lanes. I think I'm very much for like process and how you bring about them.
Interestingly, Lawndale got the first protected bike lanes in the city. They're on Sacramento. They showed up maybe 10, 12 years ago. I don't remember when. But it was a big surprise. And I didn't understand what was happening. And so, I mean, I think just to underscore your point, Lynda, folks in Lawndale were not clamoring for a protected bike lane, but we got one anyway. And how else could we have used those resources? I mean, I like them. I think they should be there, but I don't think that was the first priority of the folks who live here.
Yeah, that was a big thing. I think too in Little Village, they took or people thought they were taking away parking space, and parking here is like, people have cars because there's a statistic about how like people in certain neighborhoods live further away from their jobs than other, right? So like people in Little Village have to travel a lot further to get to their jobs than other people. And so a lot of times that means that people have cars because they have to go out to the suburbs or whatever. And they thought they were taking away their parking spaces because again, like Lynda said, there was no process to inform communities. Sometimes we don't need bike lanes, sometimes we do. And so if you don't include the community, like how are you building this, right? So like when you reconcile gentrification bike lanes, like who are you incorporating? Who's asking you for bike lanes? Who's leading this? Like there's just so many things that can be addressed that aren't by our leaders, and super upsetting. Like to me, looking from a community who has been disinvested and polluted and things like that. So I think those are things to keep in mind when we talk about putting bike lanes everywhere. It's like that's a nice thought, but like, what does the community say?
Thank you for sharing, because I feel like coming from Arizona, like I've seen that over there, but like seeing it here too, I'm just like, this is, like it's structured that way, right? They just like keep happening, not just in one place, everywhere. So definitely sharing. Thank you for sharing that, because that exposure is so valuable. Just quickly, somebody asked like how to maintain or how often to lube up their chain. And I'm not gonna say chain, anything that touches that chain, right? I say like depending on you how often you ride it. So you ride it every day and it's raining every day, try to do it like once a week. Put your favorite music, your prayer song, and just like clean that up. Just touch up on it, and then as far as like that, that's it. Just keep an eye on it. Always do your ABCs, your air, brakes, and chain. Always check them. That's it.
We're getting to 7:30, so I think we're gonna be closing out. I don't know if you all thought we had room for one more question. I don't want to take up a lot of more time.
I think that's a good question, Anne.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead, Kim.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I always have like a million questions just because I'm a curious person, but I did just want to mention like the pro tip as far as like the first few moments of the commute are always the coldest. I try to do like a warm up exercise like at home, and that warms me up, and then that way I don't have to like remove any layers because then I'm already warm. And then I'm not biking at all because of COVID, so I'm like really trying to like find a reason to like bike during the winter, or just like get outside after just like however many months of like not being biking. And I was just gonna mention, I'm losing my train of thought. Yeah, like if anybody's interested in like doing like winter bike meetups, like that's one of the main reasons why I hopped on the call, just wanting to like meet folks. So I'm gonna drop my like contact info if anybody wants to reach out.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. So if people want to share their Instagram or Twitter handles, feel free to do that. The community can be very small at times of people who are biking in the winter, especially as COVID has really ramped up the amount of bikers on the road. I think we're going to see the people who are true bike enthusiasts and people who really have to bike as a necessity. And so continuously sharing information, whether what you buy to keep you warm or what you buy to keep you safe, or if another thing of trading items. So if something that you've had and you've now moved on to something better or cooler looking, being able to share that resource with someone else. It's always important to pass something along. So not only knowledge, but material items to assist another person. So anything else? You're on mute. You do this every time. You do this every Zoom. You almost made it. You were like 2 minutes away from doing your thing where you talk and you're on mute, but you're on mute.
I always. It's like a tradition now. I just wanted to thank Lynda for like, she was the one that was just like, oh, we should just have a conversation and like hang out and bringing like amazing people to this panel. Like, honestly, I learned a lot. Keep me in mind. Reach out, Lynda. Let's drink. I know.
Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And yeah, I just had this idea, and Xail was really, really open to it, and the France as well. And Caronina and Ruth were happy to be on the panel. So it kind of just came together organically. I'm like, let's have a conversation. So I'm really glad people got something out of it. I learned a lot too. I feel like I'm always just learning, you know. I'm as much as I like have biked, I never like say I'm like, oh, I'm an expert. There's always new things to learn from each other. So hopefully we can do more spaces like this in the future.
For sure. I was definitely going to, like, if you can tweet or Instagram either one of us about other topics you want to discuss in the future. We're always trying to share space and share knowledge. So please, if you have something in mind that like, man, I have this great idea or something that I want to hear more conversation about, let us know and we will work our best and find capacity to do that.
Hey, to France. See, I'm not on mute. Courtney just asked if we're gonna be sharing this somewhere, the recording.
Yeah, as soon as we download it, that's something I have to figure out with you, but we'll talk about it offline. But yeah, everything's been recorded, so we'll throw it up.
I also just want to give a quick shout out to Equiticity. They're working on doing a lot of work around bike equity. So check them out, equiticity.com.
Cheers, guys. Salud. Gracias.
Bye.
Thanks.